Okay, welcome back to another episode of Third and 23. I'm your host, Alex, here to bring you another pick and prediction video. College football. Now we're finally in the college football playoffs. So, regular season's in the books. 53% ATS accuracy. 7 straight weeks. I went 500 every single week. Craziness. But here we are at the college football playoff. Similar to last year, I'm going to do every single college football playoff game. Even if it doesn't match my model, I'm going to still do the game, give you guys the metrics that I'm looking at, tell you how I think it's going to play out, and storylines behind each one of these games. So we go into this game. Tulane visiting Ole Miss. It's going to be a 3:30 kickoff game. Ole Miss comes in as a 17.5 point favorite. It actually opened at 16.5 and then got bumped up. How did these two teams get here? Tulane, 11-2 season. They won the American Conference. You guys already know they finished ranked higher than the ACC, so they got to go to the college football playoff over the ACC champion Duke. By the way, Tulane played Duke in the regular season and did beat them. So that's how Tulane got here. Like I said, 2 losses this year. One was to Ole Miss in Oxford, similar to how we're going to see this weekend. And Ole Miss won that game 45-10. Tulane also played against UTSA and lost to them, another blowout. It gave up another 40-burger in that one, but they beat everybody else. Ole Miss, 11-1 regular season. Their only loss was in Athens against a top 5 Georgia team. They actually had them, too. That looked like they were going to win the game. They had them in the fourth quarter, kind of collapsed a bit in the fourth quarter. Bulldogs, obviously, gritty team, came back and won that game 43-35. Great game, by the way. But Ole Miss beat everybody else. And then the chaos happened, right? A bunch of coaches are getting fired. Lane Kiffin's at the top of the charts for everybody. Lane Kiffin takes the LSU job. AD says he can't coach Ole Miss in the college football playoff. He's going to take all his offensive assistant coaches with him. And then finally he says, okay, the offensive assistant coaches can stick around, coach Ole Miss through the playoffs, and then come meet him at LSU. Tulane, by the way, they're also losing their head coach. John Summerall's going to Florida. But Florida and Tulane agreed that he can go ahead and coach the Green Wave in the college football playoff to see how far he can get his team. So the chaos was around Ole Miss, not so much around Tulane, but maybe that's stabilized, right? Maybe maybe Ole Miss is still going to look like Ole Miss of this season, despite the fact they don't have Lane Kiffin. So let's go ahead and get into some of the matchups in this game. Let's take a look at Tulane's offense versus Ole Miss's defense. Now, if you follow me, if you follow this channel, you know I don't watch G5 football. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about Tulane. I went and I watched the Tulane Ole Miss game in preparation for this video to kind of get an idea of what happened in that first game and give you my thoughts on it. So I'm going to get into that probably more towards the end. But let me give you some of the metrics. So when you're looking at Tulane's offense, if you're like me, if you don't watch G5 football, they're led by Jake Retzlaff at quarterback. Now, Jake Retzlaff can play. He was at BYU last year, and he was balling. He was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country coming into this season. Got kicked out of BYU for breaking some rules after spring practice, so he didn't have a lot of landing spots where he could go. He lands at Tulane. They win 11 games. And Retzlaff is a mobile, dual-threat quarterback. He led the team with 600 yards rushing. And in that first game against Ole Miss, he ran for 50 yards in that game. So he showed that mobility in that game. And again, watching the game, I mean, he broke contain a few times and took off running for some good gains. And as I said, Retzlaff, one of the best QBs in the country coming into 2026. He's top 15 in all pass efficiency metrics that matter. So that's Tulane's offense, like the pros of Tulane's offense. That's what it is. It's basically Jake Retzlaff carrying this offense. Defensively, Ole Miss, they've got a drop off from the 2025 season, but they still have some strong pass defense efficiency metrics. Got a good corner, Antonio Kite, and forget the name of the other corner, but a decent corner tandem. 6.3 yards per attempt they allow this season. That's 20th in the country, 13th in allowing explosive, so they don't really allow too many explosive pass plays. And then their success rate in EPA allowed, it's around 40th in the country this season. That's kind of ho-hum, right? It's kind of whatever. But it's still not terrible either in terms of pass defense. So a fall off from last year, but still decent enough on the back end. Now, cons. Jake Retzlaff in that first game against Ole Miss, against this Ole Miss defense, he only had 50 yards passing, 3.3 yards per attempt. Now, he was splitting time with Brendan Sullivan, but still a really bad performance against an Ole Miss pass defense that's decent, but it's not elite. So he couldn't do it the first game around. I'm wondering, well, what changed, right? Pete Golding, the DC for Ole Miss, is now the full-time head coach. So He's still there. It's going to be still be the same defensive coaching staff. It's going to be the same defensive players. How is Tulane going to be able to navigate that this time around? And then I don't like personally, unless you were talking about Tim Tebow or Cam Newton or Tommy Frazier, I don't like quarterbacks who lead their team in rushing. That tells me you don't really got a running back or you don't got a running back that you trust. So no running back here to rely on Retzlaff. So it's Retzlaff or bust with the Green Wave. And we saw that in the first game, right? Only had 50 yards passing in the first game, led to 10 points. Now I want to note, in game one, Tulane ran for 178 on the ground, though, as a team. Because one thing that Ole Miss can't do this season is stop the run. They were number one in the country against the run last year. What a fall off. 5.3 yards per carry they allow. Got a stuff rate of 15.6%. That's 107 in the country. So they're not strong at the line of scrimmage. EPA per attempt of zero point 0.1, which is 115th in the country, and they allow 168 yards rushing per game. So a huge fall off from last year, and Tulane exploited that in the first game. So American teams, G5 teams, and SEC teams both are exploiting this Ole Miss defense on the ground. All right, the flip side of that, Tulane's defense. What's the strength of Tulane's defense this year? Pressure rate, 38.6% pressure rate, 18.8% sack rate. Top 20 metrics here. Again, competition matters. That's against American competition. When they played against Ole Miss, they only got one sack in that game. And they allow 4.4 yards per carry. They don't really have too many strong defensive rush metrics. And as you can see here, 72nd in EPA per attempt, 91st in success rate, 100th in explosives. This is a weak two-lane run defense, and it's not a very strong pass defense either. 54th in EPA and in success rate allowed. And we saw it in that first game. In game one, Ole Miss 548 yards of offense, 7 for 11 on third down. They couldn't get them off the field. They couldn't be stopped. They pretty much did what they wanted. Ole Miss, what they got offensively, Keywan Lacey. You guys know if you follow SEC football, 1,200 yards rushing. I knew Lacey was balling, but I did not know he had 20 touchdowns this season. So he's got 20 touchdowns on the ground this year. Chambliss, Trinidad, getting 470 yards rushing to add to that. 13th in yards per attempt, 9th in expected points, and 20th in SR. Probably should have been at least in the Heisman discussion late in the year, but he really didn't get that kind of love. And then pass protection, 10th in allowed pressure rate this season for Ole Miss. So, and we saw that, and again, we saw that in game one. You know, they did what they wanted. It was probably Trinidad's best game. He threw for over 300 yards passing and had over 100 yards rushing in that game. And as a team, they ran for 240 yards and 5.7 on the ground, I believe. So they did what they wanted in that game. The big question for Ole Miss's offense is, are they going to look the same with Lane Kiffin gone? Charlie Weiss Jr., is he going to be able to get this offense going the way it was going all season? All right. And then moving now to my prediction for this game. So again, Ole Miss is 17.5 point favorite. They won game one by 35. My motto, and I know I don't ever really show this, but I'm going to show this for the college football playoff this year. My motto says Ole Miss 18.5. I'm watching the game, right? I'm watching film. Because again, I don't watch P or G5 football. When I watched this game, one thing stood out to me is that Tulane is too small and too slow on defense. Offensively, yeah, they could run the ball. They could hit some running plays on Tulane, on Ole Miss, and maybe control the clock. And that's how you beat a 17.5 point spread, right? But defensively, how do you change from week 4 to now when you're too small and too slow? You don't got better players, but you got faster and bigger? No, of course not, right? I saw Ole Miss wide receivers running past these guys. They had 4 wide receivers. Each had a play of 35 yards plus against that Tulane secondary. They bullied that Tulane front 7. Keywan Lacey looked as big as the linebackers they got there. They just looked small to me, right? Trinidad Chambliss looked bigger than everybody in the defense except maybe the D tackles, right? This is a small defense. I know Lane Kiffin being gone is a big deal and all of that. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to take the Rebs. I'm going to lay the 17.5. I think Ole Miss is still going to be in that national title mode. They're going to be hyped in Oxford. That's going to quiet the chaos of Lane Kiffin. The players know they got a chance to win a national championship. This isn't mid-season, right? They got a chance to win it all. I'm going with Ole Miss, laying 17.5. I think it's going to be very similar to game one, where the Ole Miss offense is just going to take over and score after score after score. And Retzlaff is not going to be able to pass the ball to be able to keep up in this game. So, anyways, that wraps it up. Again, I'm gonna have one video per college football playoff game, so you'll see another video for whatever game I select to do tomorrow, and so on. And if you like the content, please like, comment, subscribe, all of that, as you're gonna see more pick and prediction videos going forward. Take care.